The moving truck pulled away from the curb as Michael Reeves wiped sweat from his forehead. After months of searching, he had finally found the perfect home for himself and his 12-year-old son, Ethan. The two-story house with blue shutters sat on a quiet street in Oakwood Heights, a neighborhood known for its good schools and friendly community. "What do you think, buddy?" Michael asked, ruffling Ethan's hair. The boy smiled up at his father, his hand resting on Max's head. Max was a golden retriever with intelligent eyes and a gentle disposition. He wasn't just a pet. The special vest he wore marked him as a trained service dog who could sense when Ethan was about to have a seizure, sometimes even before Ethan himself knew. "I think Max likes it too, Dad," Ethan said as the dog wagged his tail and sniffed around their new front yard. The first week flew by in a blur of unpacked boxes and new discoveries. Michael hung Ethan's star map on his bedroom wall, while Max supervised from the doorway. They discovered a small park just 3 blocks away with perfect trees for shade and enough open space for Max to run when he wasn't working. Neighbors came by one after another, bringing cookies, plants, and friendly smiles. Mrs. Chen from next door brought homemade dumplings and stayed to chat about the neighborhood. The Jacksons from across the street invited them to a weekend barbecue. Even Mr. Peterson, an older man who rarely left his porch, waved and called out a gruff welcome when they walked past with Max. Then came the knock that changed everything. "Homeowners Association," announced a sharp voice when Michael opened the door. The woman on his porch wore a navy blue blazer despite the warm weather. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her smile into something that wasn't really a smile at all. "I'm Deborah Wilson, HOA president." She didn't wait for an invitation before stepping inside, her gaze immediately falling on Max, who lay peacefully at Ethan's feet. "This is for you," she said, handing Michael a 3-inch binder bulging with papers. "Our community guidelines. I suggest you familiarize yourself with them immediately." Her eyes narrowed at Max again, especially Section 12 regarding pets. As Deborah left without accepting Michael's offer of coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect new beginning had just hit its first snag. 3 weeks passed, and the Reeves family settled into a comfortable routine. Michael had found a shortcut to work, Ethan had made 2 new friends at school, and Max had claimed the sunny spot near the living room window as his favorite napping place. On a Tuesday afternoon, Michael sat at his desk reviewing project plans when his phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. Michael's heart jumped. Ethan never called during school hours unless something was wrong. "Dad?" Ethan's voice trembled. "You need to come home. Now." Michael found Ethan sitting on their front steps, his thin shoulders shaking. Max pressed against the boy's side, alert and protective. Tears streaked Ethan's pale cheeks. "She tried to take Max away," Ethan whispered, his fingers buried in the dog's golden fur. According to Ethan, he had just returned from school when Deborah Wilson appeared at their door with 2 other HOA board members. She waved a piece of paper in Ethan's face, a notice about their violation of the no pets over 20 pounds policy. "But he's not a pet," Ethan had explained, showing Max's service animal identification. "He's my service dog. He helps me with my seizures." Deborah wouldn't listen. "Rules are rules," she had insisted. "No exceptions." When Ethan refused to hand over Max, Deborah became angry. She reached for Max's collar, trying to pull him away from Ethan's side. Max yelped in surprise, not aggressive but clearly distressed. The noise attracted neighbors' attention, and Deborah backed off, but not before issuing a final warning. "I'm giving you 48 hours to remove that animal," she had told Ethan, "or I'll call animal control and have him taken to the pound." As Michael comforted his son, their neighbor Susan Mills hurried across the street. "I saw everything," she said, her kind face tight with anger. "That woman had no right. Max is clearly a service animal." Michael looked down at Max, noticing the red mark on his neck where his collar had been yanked. His son's service dog, his lifeline, had been treated like an unwanted stray. "What are we going to do, Dad?" Ethan asked, his voice small but his eyes determined. "We can't let her take Max." Michael pulled out his phone. There was only one person he knew who could help them navigate this situation: his brother James, who had spent 15 years working with police service dogs before becoming a consultant on service animal laws. "Don't worry," Michael told Ethan, his jaw set. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." That evening, Michael spread papers across the kitchen table. Max's service dog certification, medical papers from Ethan's doctor, printouts of laws about service animals. Next to them lay the HOA handbook with its many rules, none of which mentioned service animals. "I don't understand," Michael told his brother James over the phone. "The law is clear. Service animals aren't pets. They're working animals protected by federal law." James's voice was steady through the speaker. "You're right. The Americans with Disabilities Act trumps any HOA rule. Document everything. Take pictures of Max's collar where she grabbed him. Write down exactly what happened while it's fresh in Ethan's mind." Michael glanced at his son, who sat on the couch with Max's head in his lap. The golden retriever hadn't left Ethan's side since the incident. The next morning, Michael hand-delivered a letter to each HOA board member. He explained Max's role in Ethan's life and included copies of relevant laws. He requested an emergency meeting to resolve the situation before it went further. 2 days later, Michael found himself facing 5 board members in the community clubhouse. Deborah sat front and center, her face unreadable. "While we sympathize with your situation," she said after Michael presented his case, "our community has standards. If we make an exception for you, everyone will want a large dog." "This isn't about exceptions," Michael replied, his voice level despite his anger. "This is about following federal law that protects service animals." The vote went 3-2 against Michael, with Deborah breaking the tie. The HOA would continue to enforce their pet policy against Max. As Michael walked home, defeated, his neighbor Susan fell into step beside him. "That's not right," she said. "My daughter uses a wheelchair, and we fought similar battles before moving here. People just don't understand until it affects them personally." By the weekend, Susan had organized a small gathering in her backyard. 12 neighbors showed up, curious to learn about service animals. Michael brought Max, who demonstrated how he could alert to potential seizures and help Ethan stay safe. "I had no idea," Mr. Peterson admitted, watching Max work. "I thought he was just a pet." One by one, neighbors signed a petition supporting the Reeves family. They promised to attend the next HOA meeting and speak up. That night, as Michael tucked Ethan into bed, his son looked up with tired eyes. "Are we going to have to move again, Dad?" Michael squeezed his son's hand. "No, buddy, we're not running away. We're going to stand our ground and fight for what's right." A white envelope appeared in the Reeves mailbox every day that week. Each contained a new fine. Unauthorized animal on premises, $100. Violation of community standards, $150. Failure to comply with HOA directives, $200. Michael filed each notice carefully in a growing folder labeled Evidence. Meanwhile, Deborah began sending emails to everyone in the neighborhood. "Dangerous animal situation." The subject lines read. The messages described Max as a threat to community safety and accused the Reeves family of special treatment demands. Most neighbors deleted these emails immediately. Those who had met Max knew better. Saturday morning arrived warm and clear. Ethan decided to take Max for a short walk to the neighborhood park. His seizures had been more frequent lately. Stress always made them worse, but fresh air helped. "Stay where I can see you from the kitchen window," Michael called as Ethan clipped Max's leash on. "Back in 20 minutes, okay?" Ethan had just reached the small playground when he spotted Deborah marching toward him. Behind her walked 2 uniformed animal control officers. "That's the dog," Deborah pointed at Max. "The one I called about." One officer stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "We've received reports of an unauthorized, aggressive animal in the community," he said. "We'll need to take him to the shelter until this is sorted out." No. Ethan's voice cracked. He's my service dog. He's not aggressive. I need him. The second officer reached for Max's leash. Sorry, kid. We have our orders. Ethan felt the familiar dizziness begin. The edges of his vision darkened. His heart raced too fast. He clutched Max's fur, but his fingers wouldn't work right. Max recognized the signs immediately. He barked sharply, his alert signal, and moved his body under Ethan's hand for support. The dog ignored the officer's attempts to grab his leash, focused entirely on keeping Ethan safe as the boy began to tremble. What's happening? The first officer stepped back, confused. He's having a seizure, called Mrs. Chen, who had been walking nearby. That dog is helping him. Several neighbors gathered quickly, phones raised to record what was happening. Mrs. Chen called Michael while Mr. Peterson placed himself between the officers and Ethan. This dog is a medical device, Mr. Peterson said firmly. You touch him, you're interfering with necessary medical care. By the time Michael reached the park, Deborah had vanished. The animal control officers were apologizing, explaining they'd been told the dog was an unauthorized pet, not a service animal. Ethan sat on a bench, pale but recovering, with Max pressed against his legs. Around them stood a protective circle of neighbors, their faces set with determination. This has gone too far, Susan said, her voice shaking with anger. Someone could have been seriously hurt. Michael nodded grimly. It's time to call in the big guns. James Reeves stepped out of his truck and surveyed the quiet neighborhood. He did not look like someone to mess with. Tall, with a military haircut and posture to match. 15 years as a K9 police officer had given him a certain presence that most people instinctively respected. "Where's my nephew?" were his first words to Michael. Inside, James sat at the kitchen table reviewing everything. The HOA notices, the medical documentation, the video recordings that neighbors had shared. His face grew darker with each piece of evidence. "This woman has no idea what she's stepped into," James said finally. "Service animals aren't just protected by one law. They're covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and state disability protection laws." James spent the afternoon making phone calls. To former colleagues in the police department, to a disability rights attorney he'd worked with, to the district attorney's office, where he still had connections. "You're not fighting this alone anymore," he told Michael and Ethan over dinner. "What happened at the park wasn't just mean or unfair. It was illegal." The next morning, James visited several neighbors who had witnessed incidents with Deborah. Mrs. Chen described how Deborah had tried to have Max taken away. Mr. Peterson recalled the seizure at the park in detail. "Would you be willing to give official statements?" James asked each person. Every single one said yes. That afternoon, James and Michael sat with Susan and 3 other neighbors in the Reeves living room, planning their next steps. Max lay across Ethan's feet, occasionally raising his head to check on his young charge. "The HOA board needs to understand the seriousness of this situation," James explained. "Deborah has exposed them to significant legal liability. If they're smart, they'll distance themselves from her actions immediately." James drafted a formal letter outlining the laws Deborah had broken and the potential consequences. Each neighbor signed it. Michael would deliver it to every board member the next day. "What about Deborah herself?" Susan asked, her voice tight with anger. "She caused Ethan to have a seizure. She tried to take away his medical support. She can't just get away with that." James' expression was resolute. "She won't. I've already spoken with Detective Garcia. They're taking this very seriously." Later that night, after Ethan was asleep, Michael and his brother sat on the back porch, looking at the stars. "I was ready to give up," Michael admitted, "to just move again." James shook his head firmly. "Running doesn't teach Ethan the right lesson. Sometimes you have to stand your ground, not just for yourself, but for everyone who might come after you." Deborah Wilson was in the middle of writing another violation notice when the doorbell rang. She opened her front door to find 2 police officers standing on her porch. their expressions serious. "Ms. Wilson," the female officer asked. "I'm Officer Ramirez, and this is Officer Chen. We need to speak with you about some complaints we've received." Deborah's confident smile faded as Officer Ramirez explained why they were there. The words seemed to blur together: harassment, attempted theft of medical equipment, assault on a service animal, violating federal disability laws. "This can't be right," Deborah stammered. "I was just enforcing community rules." Officer Chen handed her an official document. "This is a restraining order. You are not to approach Ethan Reeves, Michael Reeves, or the service animal named Max. You are to maintain a distance of at least 100 feet at all times." After the officers left, Deborah sat stunned at her kitchen table. Her phone buzzed with a text message from the HOA vice president calling an emergency board meeting for that evening. The subject: presidential misconduct. By nightfall, everyone in Oakwood Heights knew what had happened. Neighbors who had never spoken up before were suddenly vocal. Stories emerged of Deborah's previous harsh enforcement actions against other residents. The elderly couple forced to remove their wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the approved design. The single mom fined for hanging holiday lights a day early. The emergency board meeting was packed. Residents filled every chair and lined the walls of the community clubhouse. Michael and James sat quietly in the back, letting the community speak. Board member after board member expressed their shock at Deborah's actions. The HOA's own lawyer explained the serious legal exposure she had created for the entire association. "Federal disability law supersedes our community guidelines," he emphasized. "Always has, always will." The vote to remove Deborah from her position was unanimous, including her former allies on the board. As the meeting concluded, the new acting president approached Michael. "On behalf of the entire board, I want to apologize for what your family has endured," she said, her voice sincere. "We'll be revising our bylaws immediately to include clear language about service animals. And of course, all fines against you are canceled." On the drive home, Michael glanced at James in the passenger seat. "Thank you," he said simply. "I couldn't have done this without you." James smiled. "That's what family does." Besides, Ethan and Max taught this community an important lesson today. At home, they found Ethan sitting on the couch reading a book, Max curled up beside him. For the first time in weeks, both boy and dog looked completely at peace.